He's an artist based in California. Julio, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
Let me ask you first, how did you end up becoming an undocumented immigrant in the United States?
Right, the big question, right? How does one end up in this situation? My parents, actually, I came here with my parents in 1995, and we came here with our, we had a passport. And once we were here, my sister became really sick, and she was hospitalized. My mom ended up giving her one of her kidneys, and so the doctors were like, "You guys have to stay here. You can't go back to Mexico, which is where I was born, and and you'll figure out your immigration status later." Again, we had a passport. A few years passed, and our passports expired. And when my parents tried to sort of fix our status, because of the situation with my sister, there was no law to allow us to apply for a green card because we hadn't been in the country for that long. And the other option would be to go back and fix our status from outside the U.S. If the situation was that if we were to leave, my sister was not going to be able to continue seeing the doctor. And when you have that type of surgery, you have to continue seeing the doctor. And so it was a decision that was based out of health reasons. My parents didn't just decided to stay here and we'll see what happens. No, it was a health reason. And so I think any parent with a child that is facing that type of situation is not going to think about their immigration status or what's going to happen in the future. They didn't even think about how that was going to affect me in the long run. They were just, they had to make a decision at the time.
Okay, so you actually came here legally. I mean, you didn't walk across the border or something like that.
No. I was privileged enough to be able. My parents had, my dad had a good job back in Mexico, and he was able to apply. I mean, that's a big reason, why people come here legally. They have access to things like getting your passport, and so we were able to come here legally.
So, what is life like living as an undocumented immigrant? I mean, in your daily life, do you have to be under the radar to avoid being stopped by police and perhaps being deported?
Well, up to 2012, in 2012 was when Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals passed. And basically what that meant was that for a lot of us, it made life much easier because we were allowed to apply for a work permit, but it was still sort of, it's still a limbo situation because it's a 2-year, a lot of people are renewing it now, but, we don't know what's going to happen, if that, a lot of people are fighting to take it back. So before that, it was a little bit harder because, I had to, I went to college, paid by myself, I didn't qualify for any, loans or any type of money from the government. So I pretty much paid everything myself. I couldn't, get a driver's license. And so many times, I'm from California, I got pulled over, and there's this huge fear there was a huge fear of getting deported, and not knowing what was going to happen. Right now, I am a little bit safe, but I don't know when that is going to be taken away. Also, my parents are still, undocumented because they don't qualify for DACA. There's a big push right now for this administration to extend DACA for people like our parents because the DACA was only.
What is that? Sorry, could you explain that to us? DACA, what is that?
So DACA is it stands for Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals, and basically it was passed in 2012 by this administration, and it gave folks like myself who came here at a young age who would qualify for the DREAM Act. The DREAM Act was another law that it could potentially give us a path to a green card, but it hasn't passed. So DACA was sort of like a piecemeal, like here for now. And but it only it's only for 2 years, and again, a lot of people are trying to get that take it away. And so the thing is that if it gets taken away, a lot of us will be put in deportation proceedings.
Right.
And so but it's only a small group of people who benefit from this law. And so So it's bittersweet, really, because there's a lot of people who have been fighting for the Dream Act who aged out. If you are past 31, you don't qualify, even
That's
though
right.
you
So
came
the
here at a
Dream
younger
Act
age.
actually would help people who came here before the age of 15 and who are still under the age of 30. That would give them a pathway to citizenship.
Yes,
I want to ask you about
correct.
something that you mentioned a moment ago, and that is going to college here in the United States. How did you actually go to college, despite the fact that, of course, you paid for it, but you are undocumented? So how did you get into
Yeah.
college?
Yeah, so I was lucky enough to be living in California. In California, in 2001, there was something called AB 540, which it allowed undocumented students and citizens, not just undocumented students, to pay in-state tuition. If you weren't from the state but you graduated from a California high school, you were able to pay in-state tuition. Now, this was in 2001, a while back, and so the fees for college were a little bit cheaper than they are now. And so I was able to, I washed dishes, I did construction work. I'm an artist, so I use my art to, I would do caricatures and, get paid for that. And that's how I pay for school.
In addition to the fact that you use art to make a little bit of money, you also use art to make your case for immigration reform.
Yes, yeah, because I truly believe that in order to change policy, we need to change culture. A lot of the things that we see out there about immigrants, a lot of the times are really negative. We're either we're criminalized. We are people who are taking advantage of this country, and you don't really hear a lot of stories about. We don't see three-dimensional stories about ourselves, and so I use my art to sort of give a voice to myself, because I don't speak for others. I speak for myself. But I have the opportunity to collaborate with other folks and sort of use art to tell our stories, because I think human beings are very we're visual beings, and I think that we need to see ourselves in art. A lot of the times we don't see ourselves, and we see ourselves as this negative. And mainstream America get their idea of who we are as migrants through 5-second clips on the news, and that's not enough. And so as artists, as a migrant artist, it's my responsibility to be able to use my art to share the stories, to tell other stories about our what is it like to be an undocumented immigrant in the United States.
Right. When President Obama was campaigning for the White House, he campaigned, or one of his platforms was that he would introduce meaningful, comprehensive immigration reform when he became president. He hasn't done anything like that. Has he let people like you down?
Of course. I mean, it's there's a lot of us call him the deported in chief. Under his administration, the rates of deportations, are huge, are so big, and so it was a huge disappointment to see that instead of him being, sort of like, changing, the course in migrant history and trying to change at least, some sort of, like DACA for the rest of our parents, but it's been the opposite. And I've been working on this for many years, and I'm very jaded when it comes to politicians, and both Democratic and Republican, because a lot of the times we think that, it's the Republicans that are, against immigration, and it's the Democrats that are on our side. But the reality is that this administration is a Democratic administration, and we've had a lot of deportations, and families keep breaking apart. And so I really don't trust politicians, but it is a political game, and sadly that's the case right now. There's elections coming up.
Yeah, that's right. President Obama has in fact deported more undocumented immigrants than President George Bush. And President Obama still has a few more years left in office. Let me ask you this. You've lived in the United States since you were 11. Do you feel and identify more as an American right now than a Mexican?
Well, I mean, I was old enough to, I still remember Mexico. I call myself a Mexican. I was born in Mexico. I am from this American country, continent, you know, Mexico being part of the American continent. And so I was born in this side of the world. I definitely, my views a lot of the times, or, you know, I get this from my family members who visit sometimes from Mexico. You know, they tell me that I'm very Americanized. But, you know, the language, of course, you know, English, you know, being my second language, I've adopted the language. But in my heart, I'm still, I want to go back. I want to visit my country. I haven't been able to go back in so many years, and I miss it. I want to visit. But my home, my community is now here. You know, I live here now. My friends are here. And so I want to be able to visit my home country and be able to come back home, because this is what I've made home, regardless of how, you know, others might not like me or might see me as a criminal. This is my home. But I'm not allowed to go visit my home and come back here. So I miss that. I'm you know, I've taken both cultures. I love both, you know, Mexican music and, you know, American music. Right. So I'm both. And it's great. It's you know, I feel privileged to be able to speak both two languages. You know, there's more of me to give.
Yeah, you have the best of both worlds. Julio Salgado,
Exactly.
thank you for joining us, sir.
Thank you.